Welcome to the Matt Waller Podcast, where we look at success at the intersection of technology, logistics, supply chain, retail, and CPG, also known as the retail value chain. I want to clarify that this podcast is distinct from my responsibilities as a professor in the Sam M. Walton College of Business. Nonetheless, it aligns with my aspiration to provide practical insights to professionals and business by showcasing companies and people that can enhance your ability to manage, lead, and strategize and market effectively in the retail value chain. Before we dive into today's exciting episode, I'd like to thank our sponsor, NewRoad Capital Partners. NewRoad invests in proven technologies, services, and products that serve unmet needs in the marketplace. They look for companies in supply chain and logistics, as well as consumer-oriented companies. For more information, go to newroadcp.com. I would also like to disclose that I am a strategic advisor to NewRoad. I'd also like to recognize podcastvideos.com for the services they provide for these podcasts. I'm very pleased with their services. And now, without further ado, let's get into the exciting episode. Today I have with me Jeremy Wilson, who is a partner and co-founder at NewRoad Capital Partners, a private equity firm in Bentonville, Arkansas. This is really an exciting and interesting podcast episode. If you're interested in entrepreneurship, if you're interested in investing, innovation, then you definitely should listen to this podcast. You know, Jeremy really is a serial entrepreneur and investor. He has over 25 years of experience growing and scaling businesses. And as I mentioned, he currently serves as managing partner of NewRoad Capital Partners. They tend to focus on supply chain and retail investments primarily. But with NewRoad, he oversees a team of 16 investment professionals. He's also on the board of several NewRoad portfolio companies. And in fact, I asked him a question about what it takes to be an effective board member that some of you may find interesting. One other thing about him that you may find interesting is he serves on the board of trustees of the University of Arkansas system. The University of Arkansas system isn't just over the University of Arkansas Fayetteville, it's over all of the campuses, including the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences, the medical school in Little Rock. And he's also founder and board member of Now Diagnostics, and he's held board positions with many, many technology companies, including Spotlight, Overdrive Brands, Rockfish, and many others. So I think you'll enjoy this podcast recording. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Jeremy, you have an extensive background in business in general, but also entrepreneurship. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey that led you to become a partner at NewRoad Capital, and really just understanding what inspired you to found the firm.
Yeah, thanks for the question. My journey is probably a little bit different than Cleve, my co-founder, who you know. I started my career at Walmart back in the early 90s, and I had a finance degree, and in those early days, thought my journey would take me up, hopefully, through the CFO path of that business, and I spent about 3 years running their corporate cash management team, and then about an equal amount of time running investor relations for the company. And, really great early foundational roles for me, gave me just a ton of proximity to some of the greatest business minds, in America in those days. And I developed some really, truly lifelong, wonderful mentee relationships with people like Don Soderquist and Lee Scott and Tom Shoey, who was the CFO of Walmart in those days, and truly formational kinds of experiences for me, just because of the proximity to those kinds of people. I got to learn a tremendous amount about, how to think critically about things, how to approach problems, how to deal with people, how to build teams, all of those kinds of really foundational, fundamental business leadership lessons. One of the other things I learned along the way is, although I enjoyed the kind of corporate support, finance side of the business, I really realized I wanted to run a business. I wanted to operate a business. I had left Walmart to run investor relations for a company in Dallas called Brinker International, which at the time was the second largest casual dining chain in the country, next to Darden, and owned a plethora of casual dining restaurant brands like Chili's and Macaroni Grill and Maggiano's. And so I was running investor relations for them. For me, it was a opportunity to see a bigger marketplace, to see a different company, to sort of experience something different. Walmart approached me about coming back to help get a new, really nascent business off the ground called financial services. And so at the time, I think the company offered money orders and money transfers. It wasn't a really significant business, but the board had the ideas of being able to grow that into a much more substantive part of Walmart's offerings to the consumer in those days. And so I came back to the company, really seeing it as an opportunity for me to bring a financial background to an operating role. And I had just a tremendous amount of luck when it came to having really great people around that business help do what we wanted to do. I'm not a very bright person, as you know, Matt, so it only took me about 7 years to realize.
I know that.
It only took me about 7 years to realize that what I thought I was doing was running a business, and what I really learned I was doing was running a P&L. And those are just really different things. After I left the company, I came back to run financial services, and then after I was there for about 7.5 years, and then after I left the company again, one of those mentors I mentioned earlier, Lee Scott, called me, maybe about 3 months after I left. And Lee said, how's it going? What do you think? Was it a good move? Are you enjoying what you're working on? And I said, I'm loving it. And I've just learned a tremendous amount. He said, what's the biggest surprise? What's the thing that has surprised you the most, in moving from, Walmart to Rockfish? And the biggest surprise for me that I mentioned him was that I didn't realize all the other things that happened around me at Walmart that enabled me to do what I was doing, right? At Walmart, I didn't have to worry about all the support functions. I didn't have to worry about payroll and benefits and, hiring attorneys and HR and all that. Those things were all done for me, right? All I had to do was develop products and services, deliver them to the market through an existing, store infrastructure. And so, to me, the experience at Walmart was really, second experience was really about learning how to generate, marketing and sales activity, how to sell products through a store, how to manage a P&L, how to manage teams to drive products and services. The sort of next phase of my career when I joined Rockfish was really about learning to be an entrepreneur. And thankfully, my business partner there, Kenny Tomlin, and the other person, Steve Clark, were really great partners for me in that way. Kenny is probably the one of the, if not the single best entrepreneur I've ever met. He just has a really deep understanding for what it takes to be an entrepreneur. And my role at Rockfish when I joined was to help him sort of build the infrastructure of that business to manage the growth that we were experiencing. Our business grew in the 4.5 years I was there, 65% compounded annually every year. For 4.5 years, that's a lot of growth. And Kenny, who is this super strong entrepreneur needed a partner who could every day help him build the infrastructure of that business, just to, manage the growth of the business. And so, that's a really long-winded answer to your question. But at the end of the day, for me, the progression over those, couple of decades was really about starting as a financial support person, building the kind of raw building blocks of my career that helped me understand, how to deal with people and manage teams and build, relationships and work with people and all that sort of stuff. And then, this sort of next phase was really about learning to run a business, learning to sell product, learning to market product or services. The next stage is really about learning to be an entrepreneur. And at the end of the day, did I lose you, Matt?
So, Jeremy, it's really impressive to think that Lee Scott followed up with you. I guess that shows how caring he really was as a leader.
He really was. Lee was such an influential person in my life. He, for whatever reason, liked me and took me under his wing and taught me a lot, spent a lot of time with me. There would be, one of the great things about those early jobs that I had was, and I mentioned this earlier, was just the geographic proximity to those people. Finance sat right next door to Executive Row. My very first job, my chair opened up to a hallway that essentially was Executive Row, and Bud Walton sat in his office right behind me. I mean, I could get up and take about 15 steps and walk into his office. And so the proximity, just the physical proximity to those people was really remarkable. And so I got to know them. I guess they got to know me. Lee took a liking to me, and for whatever reason, and he and I built a great mentorship, menteeship, and I would say friendship over the years. And he was a great leader to me in a lot of ways. He never, or very rarely, did he direct me to do anything. He gave me a suggestion. A lot of times he gave me an idea of what he was trying to accomplish, and then he let me go and fail if I was going to fail, or succeed if I was going to succeed. He guided me along the way, but he never. I don't think I ever remember a single time where he said, "Don't do this" or "do this." He asked a lot of questions and guided and sort of shaped the direction of my thinking along the way. But just a tremendous, mentor for me in that way. I learned a tremendous amount from him over the years I was there. And we still keep in touch, some not as much as I would like, but we still talk.
What an amazing story. I met him when he was EVP of logistics.
Yeah.
When I
back in the early days.
But then, he had a meteoric rise pretty quickly after that.
He did. He had a great way about him. I think if you got to work with him, that company had such a great string of leaders. Still, obviously, to this day, has had such a great string of leaders. Doug has obviously just done an amazing job, and Mike before him, Lee before that, David. I cannot imagine, and I don't know that I've ever said this to Lee. I kind of wish I may need to say this now that I'm going to say it out loud, on this podcast. But it would be a hard job to fill David's shoes. But Lee stepped into that challenge, and he did it in his own way. He didn't do it as David, number two. He did it as Lee. I admire him a tremendous amount for that. It's just a tough job at a really tough time in the company's history. There's a lot of external pressure, on the business at that time. So anyway, really great leader for me to get to learn from. But I also I got to travel with Don Soderquist a lot. Don taught me the softer side of, of management. Don was, he could be really firm if he wanted to be, but he was really just an amazing person. I'm sure and got to spend time with him. Don taught me one of the greatest lessons I've ever been taught in business or in life, frankly. I was running the corporate cash management team at the time, and someone in the business wanted to issue a commercial letter of credit, which we did out of the cash office for some very large amount of money. It was like, I don't know, 250 million or something. And I don't even, it's been so long now. I don't even remember why I took issue with it, but I didn't think it was the right thing to do. And so, I told him we weren't going to do it. And if we need to talk more about it, I'd be happy to. And the next thing I know, I found myself in Don's office with that person. And Don, in Don's way, asked me a bunch of questions as to why I had said no, and asked that person a bunch of questions as to why they needed it. And ultimately he sided with them, and he looked at me and said, "Jeremy, I want you to go issue the letter of credit." And I literally said these words. I said, "Hey, look, I can be a good general and I can be a good soldier. So in this case, I'll go be the good soldier and I will get this done." And we stood up to leave, and he said, "Thank you, goodbye" to the other person. And then he said, "Jeremy, I'd like you to stay." And I thought, oh no, I'm about to get, fired, and he said, "Why don't you have a seat?" And I sat down, and he goes, "Look, you're learning a really good lesson here, today in this job." And he said, I want you to know one thing, even though I decided that we needed to do what that person wanted us to do, I'm glad that you did what you did. And then he sort of paused for a second, and he said, "I want you just to remember, if you always do what's right, you'll never be wrong." And to me, so what he was saying to me was, in your mind, what you thought the right thing to do was to not do this. And I may have decided differently, but you did the right thing because you stood up for what you thought was the right thing to do. And it was just such a powerful lesson at that moment. It really, truly, and it's not just, he didn't just say it, it wasn't like, "Hey, I'm glad the way he did it was as powerful as what he said to me. And I've never forgotten it. I mean, if you go back and look at some of the quotes I've had in other articles or in the Arkansas, 250 or things of that nature, I always point to that as just one of the absolute foundational leadership lessons I've ever, been given by anyone. And it was just a 2-minute, thing, but it made such a big difference to me in that moment. And I've always tried to, I've always remembered that at those moments in time, through my career, where I've had the opportunity to do the same thing for someone else, just to sort of give them that little piece of advice, take that extra 2 minutes to do it, because it made a huge difference for me.
If I were to guess, if someone said, "Okay, which leader from Walmart had the biggest impact on Jeremy," just based on what I've witnessed in working with you, I would have guessed Don Soderquist.
Yeah, I think they're like, I could keep going too, right? Tom Shoey taught me a tremendous amount. Tom, I don't know if you ever got to meet or spend time with Tom, but Tom is one of the strongest CFOs I've ever seen, maybe the strongest. And one of the things he taught me was that a really, really good CFO is technically proficient, but almost more important than that is the ability to take those technical details, those maybe to some complicated financial, ideas or structures or metrics or KPIs. He had this way of taking those things and boiling them down into very easy to understand business principles that anyone could understand and sort of understand how to impact, and that's not just, a great leadership quality in finance, that I've seen that in other areas as well. Like, if you're a software engineer, but you have the ability to, speak business, if you will, to take the complicated, aspects of developing, software, and put that into terminology that the business partners can understand and understand how to impact and understand how to build within. That is extraordinarily powerful. Someone, Michael Palladino, is very, very good at that. He's one of the best I've ever seen at being able to take complicated software engineering, challenges, ideas, and translate them into, ideas or concepts or what have you that the business partners can really understand and can build within. So to come back to, those leaders at Walmart, I would put Tom Shoey up there as well. I think at the end of the day, if you said pick one, I would probably have trouble doing it because there were so many. But Lee, I would probably say it was at the end of the day. I just got to spend so much time with him, and he spent so much time with me.
To your point, it's amazing that Walmart's had so many terrific leaders. It's they're truly remarkable leaders.
Yeah,
so
no question. Absolutely, and they spend a lot of time, on that, which I give them a lot of credit for because it's really easy to not do that.
Oh yeah. Well, I want to come back to your path. But before I do, I would like to jump to NewRoad and ask a question about that, and then go back to, I have a couple other follow-up questions. But
yeah, I'm not sure I actually finished my first question all the way through to the NewRoad part of that. But go ahead.
So you mentioned that you worked at Rockfish as well.
Yeah,
I think that's where we left off.
I think you're right.
So would you continue with that at Rock?
Sure. Yes. Yeah. No worries. So, I was in that financial services role for probably a 7 or a little more, 7 years plus. And again, what I really realized was I loved running this P&L. I loved running what I thought, was this business, but I also realized what I was really doing was just running a P&L. I didn't have to deal with all the other aspects of truly being an entrepreneur and running a business. I was an entrepreneur, right, with a lot of support around me. And so, luckily through one of those little strokes of, fate, when I was at Walmart in financial services, one of the folks that I worked with day in and day out was Kenny Tomlin, and Kenny was in Walmart IT at the time, and was kind of the lead IT person for Walmart Financial Services from an ISD standpoint. And so, when we wanted to develop a new product or service, Kenny would be the poor soul that would have to go out and do all the hard work to figure out how to integrate that product or that service with our systems. And Kenny and I developed a really great friendship. And one day he walked into my office and told me he was going to leave the company. And I tried very hard to talk him out of it for both selfish reasons and also because I knew that he had a really good path, inside Walmart. But Kenny had greater visions that I didn't frankly quite see at the time. And that was to go create what ultimately became Rockfish. And so Kenny left the company. It only took me a couple of years to realize the error of my ways and not having started it with him. But Kenny left the company, started Rockfish. I joined about 2 years later after he had grown it to about $2 million in revenue and probably about 20 people. For me, it truly was this opportunity for me to go be an entrepreneur without having to take 100% risk. It was a chance for me to go to a company that already had a good base. It was with a person that I knew and respected and had worked with in the past. It was also, frankly, an industry and a business that I knew nothing about. And so it was really a kind of a little bit of a leap of faith for me, but into, a business that already had some momentum and really great people around it. And, I think for Kenny and for the business and Steve, who was Kenny's partner there, the role that I could play for them was this structured business person. It was the person that could kind of come alongside Kenny and spend every day making sure that the infrastructure of the business, the processes and the people and the, everything else that goes along with that, we're keeping up with the pace of growth of the, of the sales side of the business, if you will. And so we partnered together, very much in that way. We had an amazing team there, built an incredible team, over that 4 years or so, and then sold it to the WPP, probably about 4.5 years after I joined the company. And so for me, what I thought I was doing ultimately, came to be, but it was a chance for me to go learn what it was really like to be an entrepreneur and to learn if I could do it. Not everybody can really, it's a tough job. When you have to wake up every day and worry about, making payroll and, you've got all these people that are counting on you and, it's just a different, it's a different animal, than working at, a job for a big company. And so for me, it was an opportunity to learn what that was like. And it was an opportunity to do it in the safety of business that had really proven that it, wasn't going to fail. And so, that's what I was hoping to get out of it. And what I found out, very quickly was I loved it. I loved having to wake up every day and worry about, how to keep this business, going and how to manage the complexities of the growth that we were dealing with and, manage, client relationships and all that sort of stuff. It was just a tremendous learning experience for me because again, the first half of my career to that point had all been, really more support roles, right? The first 7.5 years of my career were real finance support roles. The next, 7 years were, in financial services, but really not running, a business in the holistic sense of the word. And so it was a little bit of a progression for me now to be able to go, learn what it was like to actually own and run the business, and so out of that experience and the success of Rockfish and all the, wonderful people that were around that business and the opportunities that afforded us, after we sold the business to WPP, again, I'm not that bright of a person, but it took me a few months to realize that, we had built such an amazing team there, especially at the C level that, I didn't need to stay around and be another voice at the table. So I left with, not a lot of ideas of what I was going to do next and wasn't in too big of a rush to figure it out. Spent a lot of time with my family, over that period of time, which I highly encourage everyone to do. If you ever get a chance to kind of decompress, take a step back and decompress, like that, I highly recommend it. It was a great experience for me. But, after 6 months, I got really antsy again and started trying to figure out what I was going to do and began to get a lot of calls from, people that I worked with in the past. And one of the threads of those calls that I began to notice was, these were people at major companies all around the country that had problems in their business that they could see, right? They knew that they had an opportunity or a thing that a product or service their business needed, and they needed help to bring that to life. And in many cases, it wasn't. They didn't want another big corporate partner to help them to figure out what that answer to that issue was or what the product or service needed to look like. They wanted a more entrepreneurial, point of view. And so what I began to sort of see is this idea that, if you can tap into those relationships with those big corporate partners and you can listen to what their needs are and what they're struggling with in their business, there's a ton of opportunity to help them out and to build businesses around that. And that idea of what we now call demand-driven investing kind of came out of that experience. If we can listen to the needs in the marketplace, it will make us a better investor and a better partner and a better firm. So that's sort of the long journey of how I got from Walmart through Rockfish.
So, I've noticed that a lot of entrepreneurs came out of Rockfish.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is? It seems like there's a lot. I mean, going way down the line to fairly entry-level people.
Yeah. Well, I think at the end of the day, the core of the answer to that is that business was incredibly entrepreneurial at its foundation. We created opportunities for people to be entrepreneurs themselves. So if they had an idea inside the business that they had developed because of some, experience they had with a client or because of something they saw, and something that they were dealing with, and they put together a business plan, and we thought it was a good business plan and a good idea, we would launch that business. We would create it as a separate entity, and we would share the equity in that new business with those individuals that developed the idea and brought it to life. And so we tried to find ways to really institutionalize, if you will, that entrepreneurial nature, across the company. And we had, a lot of success doing that. I would give Kenny a ton of credit as well, just because he is such a strong entrepreneur and such a strong personality that, just by proximity, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you can learn a lot from him. And Steve is the same way, as Steve Clark. And so, I think just because of the DNA of that business and the individuals that started it and the way that we tried to build mechanisms for people to be their own entrepreneurs inside the business, that ultimately sort of led people to say, look, I've got another great idea. I'm going to go try to do it on my own outside of the business. And we always knew that would be the case and applauded people for doing that. It's a big leap of faith. It's a big risk that entrepreneurs take. It's a ton of pressure, and so I think, I think Kenny and Steve would agree, one of the greatest things that business did was spawn, really great entrepreneurs that could go on and do their own.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So, Jeremy, talk a little bit about the founding of NewRoad and some more of that story.
Yeah, sure. So, the short version of that is that I was sort of fresh off of this Rockfish experience. I had, learned to love the idea of being an entrepreneur. I'd learned a tremendous amount over that 4.5 years or so. And I was trying to sort of figure out what next to look like. As I mentioned, I wasn't in too big of a hurry, but I was kind of starting to, dabble in some of these ideas that were sort of coming at me, and some of those have gone on to become businesses like Now Diagnostics in Springdale, which was an idea that was really originally seeded by Walmart. It was one of those opportunities where Walmart saw a need in the marketplace and wanted to partner with someone who could bring a new way of thinking to the opportunity. And so we set off to try to figure out what the solution to a category of at-home diagnostic products could look like. And so, armed with some of those kinds of experiences like that, where companies had approached us with those thoughts, Cleet Brewer and I were on a church committee together one evening, walking out of this committee, and we began talking, and I don't remember if it was me or Cleet, said, hey, let's go have lunch, next week and just talk a little bit about some of these things that we're both working on. And out of that lunch came this idea of NewRoad. It was really a combination of some of the things that I was already working on and some of the thoughts that I had about how to fund some of these companies that I had started to tinker around with, combined with Cleet's experience as an investor also, and sort of his desire to create a fund in this area that could, sort of bring more capital to the early stage ecosystem here at that time. And so out of, it was really a situation where the two of us were kind of coming at the same idea from slightly different directions. We sat down together, we sketched it out literally on a napkin, which we have here at the office, on a wall. And we put together the NewRoad concept over that lunch. And the idea really from its beginning was demand-driven and operator-led investing. And so, the idea is that we like to de-risk at whatever stage we're investing at, right? Whether it's very, very early stage, which we did in the beginning of our firm, or whether it's the B's and, B rounds that we do today. At any stage, of investing, what we try to do is de-risk the investment by ensuring that there is proven, quantifiable, existing demand for whatever that product or service or technology is. And so that takes shape in many different ways at different times. But at the end of the day, a lot of times that is ensuring that there are enterprise level customers for that product or service or technology. That, if the idea is that if Walmart or Procter & Gamble or Johnson & Johnson or whomever has a need in their business and they're willing to partner with, an earlier stage company to fill that need, that is validation that the need is real and existing and a significant, issue for those businesses. And that the investment that we're going to make is maybe not the solution, but at least one of these solutions, to fill that need in the marketplace. And so what we do is we look for those demand-driven kind of opportunities, and we wrap around that, as you very well know, the operating talent to make sure that those businesses have all the jet fuel that they need to be able to, do what they're already doing faster, better, stronger, right? So if it's wisdom that comes from having been around the block and made mistakes and made good choices and bad choices and all those kinds of things, then we can help kind of guide and shape from that direction. If it's, relationships or connections in the industry that they need from a sales perspective, we can help in that area. If it's experience, vetting and bringing on new C-level talent, we can help in that area. Across all of those need states, we can bring real deep foundational, expertise, operational expertise to help them do, what they're doing already, but just better and faster. And so Clete and I came out of that lunch with this idea that the ecosystem needed, capital, right? The first fund that we had was primarily, a regional fund focused in this area. And so the original idea was, our ecosystem needed access to capital. There were lots of good opportunities here, but we're both, relatively frugal and entrepreneurs at heart. And so, you don't like to make a bad, investment. So you really want to make sure that you de-risk the investment as much as possible. That's where the demand-driven side of the investment thesis came from. The operator-led side of the thesis came from this idea that, we're not very good at just passively investing either, that if we're going to invest, we want to make sure that we're bringing value to the table. And so over the lunch, we sketched out those kind of two key, pillars of the NewRoad philosophy. And then, within, a matter of a couple of weeks, probably had created the partnership and we're off and running. And very shortly thereafter, we thought, we needed to raise some capital, so that we could, get this new fund off the ground. And so we approached Doug Dane, who I had known from my Walmart days. He was the chief merchant at Walmart back when I was in financial services. And so we approached Doug as, a person that might be interested in investing. And over the lunch meeting that we had with Doug, he very quickly turned it into, this is really exciting. I'm really interested in doing this with you. So how about we just do it together? And next thing you know, we had three partners. And it was a great, really a wonderful, has always been a really wonderful partnership of three like-minded individuals who approached things differently, but were very open to listening to each other, and willing to say, here's my opinion, but I'm open to listening to your opinion, and together we'll formulate the best, path forward. It's always been a really great partnership from that perspective.
Speaking of contributing to the companies you invest in, you've served as a board member on quite a few different portfolio companies, including New Engine, M4 Mobile Research, Spotlight Inc., et cetera. In your experience, what are the key qualities of an effective board member, and how do you contribute to success, of these companies through those roles?
Sure. I think, there's a fiduciary obligation that, a board member serves, right? There's a mentorship and guidance, role that a board member plays as well. I always, start, my board positions just thinking about the experiences that I've gone through in my career that might help pave a little bit of a smoother path, for those entrepreneurs or those business leaders that are in the trenches, every day running the business. And that might be, one of the companies that we've invested in. It may be, the University of Arkansas Board of Trustees. They're one of the biggest roles that a board member plays is just in sharing guidance and wisdom. I always say, you can be born very smart. You can be bright from birth, but you really don't gain wisdom other than years on the planet. You get wisdom from having experienced life. You make good choices and bad choices, and you see other people make good choices and bad choices. You live life, and through the experience of living life and making good and bad choices and witnessing others, you gain wisdom. And so what I always try to approach the board roles that I play, whether that be as the board member or as an observer, which I sit on a lot of boards as, my first approach is really just always sharing the wisdom of things that I've seen and done that could help make their path a little bit smoother. I always try to listen. A lot of times, at least I try not to be the first person to talk, because I'm trying to really be a good listener. I'm trying to understand really what their issues and challenges are, and then trying to be very thoughtful about what my response to that is and what my guidance to them is. One of our core values here at NewRoad is thoughtful interaction, and so I would say I'm not perfect, at that, but I really try hard to listen to what the needs are and be thoughtful in the response, and to try to help guide and shape, the decisions they're making. I try not to be, and this probably goes back some to the role that Lee Scott played in my career. I try not to be directorial. You should do this, you need to do this or that. I try to guide, if you will. I think that we're investing in management teams and partnering with management teams that are really, really good, or we wouldn't have made the investment in the first place, And so what I'm trying to do in that role is understand how they see their needs and challenges and opportunities, and then guide them to make what I think is the right choice, or what I would do if I were them. And 9 times out of 10, that works really, really well. There are some times where it doesn't, and you have to, get a little more, elbows deep. But at the end of the day, if we've made a good choice on who the C team is that we've invested in, that's really all it takes. Beyond that, I'm focusing on things like helping to make introductions to them that would be beneficial for them, whether that be a new person they need to bring on staff, or whether it be a consultant that they might have a need for in some area, or whether it be helping them build the structure for their sales team, or their go-to-market strategy, or their marketing strategy, or whether it be connecting them to potential clients or whatever on their side of the business, or ultimately whether it be helping them think through, the exit strategies, which is as important as the entry strategies. Those are all the things that I'm thinking about when I'm going into that board relationship, and I'm spending that time with the company, and that's a little bit about the approach that I try to take anyway.
So, Jeremy, you've had incredible experiences as an entrepreneur at Walmart, as an entrepreneur. You've had tremendous leadership roles. What advice would you give to leaders looking to grow their businesses?
It's a great question, Matt, and I think a really insightful one. I think I would start with saying the number one thing, piece of advice I would give them is listen, and that is listen to the marketplace. If you're an entrepreneur, you have an instinct about what's right. What the need is in the marketplace or the business that you want to create or whatever. And you're probably going to be right most of the time. But listen really carefully to what people around you are saying, what the marketplace in general is saying, what you're seeing competitors do, and take the information out of that constantly. It's not a one-time thing. It's an every day, it's an every hour, it's an every week kind of a measurement that they need to do to understand how to, in the early days, shape the idea of what they're trying to put together and trying to bring to market. And then, over time, how to evolve and pivot that idea in that business to, ultimately get it to where it needs to get to without, frankly, watering down or betraying, the original, business that they were trying to create. So number one thing is listen to what is happening around you. The second thing would be surround yourself with people who aren't going to just tell you what they think, you want to hear. Get really good people around you. Always, always, always hire people that you think are better than you in areas. I think that's one of the key areas where I see entrepreneurs in particular fail is because, to be an entrepreneur, you've got to have a certain level of confidence. You can call it ego or call it whatever you want. I mean, this, Matt, you've been with it. You've got to have a certain level of confidence to think that you can go out on your own and do something like that.
That's right.
Right. But you've got to balance that amount of confidence with this idea that you may not know everything, and that there probably are people who are better at parts of what you need to get done than you are going to be. And so you've got to augment you've got to be really in tune with what your strengths are and not give in those areas, but you've got to be really in tune with what your opportunities are too, and bring people around you that are going to be able to do, that part of what needs to be done better than you are. One of the areas I see entrepreneurs really fail, and frankly, business people in general fail a lot, is they're not in tune with those two things, their strengths and their weaknesses, and they don't bring people around them, to do those things that they're not, the best person in the room, to do. And so be understanding of that and be quick to bring in people to help you, in those areas. Another thing is that, really successful entrepreneurs are quick to realize when they've made a mistake. I sort of joke a lot of times that I've noticed that with entrepreneurs, they're often wrong, but never in doubt. And that's, that speaks to that confidence, right? It's like you just instinctively think the right thing to do in a given situation. And that's fine. If that's all you do, you're going to fail a lot of times, But if you're often wrong, never in doubt, and then you're willing to recognize when you made a bad decision very quickly, and you deal with it and you change it and you make a different decision and you learn from that, that's what separates marginally successful people or people who aren't successful from the really, really successful people, both in business and in life. If you can be confident enough to have a point of view, to march in that direction, but also confident enough to realize it maybe wasn't the right, direction or the right decision, and you can change that very quickly. That's what separates, marginal success from huge success. So those are areas I think, that I've noticed are, pretty systemic across really successful entrepreneurs and separate, the successful from the not.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. This has been really exciting. I've really enjoyed our conversation, but I also appreciate you taking the time to do this. Thank you so much.
Hey, my pleasure, Matt. It was great. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for everything that you're doing.